Okay, we are live. We're live across LinkedIn and YouTube and our Facebook communities. So let's make a start. So, hi, my name is Andrew. I'm a producer here at How to Thrive. Just like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands, the Wurundjeri, Woi Wurrung, and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. So welcome to this webinar. It's a Thriving Amid Psychosocial Hazards live stream webinar. And this is where we'll start exploring psychosocial hazards with a strengths-based approach. Today, we're joined by the incredible Marie McLeod, who you may know we featured in the documentary How to Thrive. Marie's an extremely talented and knowledgeable wellbeing expert who works with organizations and individuals for thriving. So let me introduce her to you now. Hello, Marie.
Hello, hello. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you for that warm introduction. I'm not sure about all that, but it's a delight to be here and join you in this conversation, which is very important for all of us right now as we begin to consider more deeply about the navigation of psychosocial hazards at work. So I'm going to dive right in. I think that you can see my slides. Is that right, Andy? The slides are already
bring that up now. Also, just remind everyone that we've got various different platforms today, and if you want to reach out to us, make a comment in your service, so via LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook, and we'll see those and we'll respond to those. And yes, the recording, we will record this webinar and we'll post them to various platforms later on. So take it away, Marie.
Thank you very much. So, as we said, we are here today to talk about hazards. And I don't know about you, but even just the word hazard makes me feel fear and feel a sense of concern and anxiety. And I think that we're all maybe feeling that a little bit, particularly with the new legislations that is making workplaces really having to focus in on what responsibility they have in this space. But before we talk about the hazards today, I wanted to tell you a little story, a little bit of my own story in this space. So bear with me and we will come back to hazards. So nearly 19 years ago, I became a parent to twins that were born 6 weeks early, and it was one of those times when I knew that they were coming, but they came a little sooner than expected, and they were born very, very small, and they had to spend a whole month in the special care unit and starting out in incubators and being tube fed and all that kind of thing. And it was a very anxious time for me. These were much awaited babies. And as they got stronger and able to come home, my parenting journey began, and these little beings became my responsibility. And like every parent, I was very much thinking about how I would protect them from the dangers of the world. And so I did all the things that other parents do of, the car seats and the high chairs and, taping over the power plugs and the harsh edges of furniture and putting the poisons up and all of those kind of things. And they grew and they got stronger. And as they did that, they began to go out into the world and into places where I no longer had control over their environment. And so as that happened, I began to realize that I didn't have the control over their safety in those contexts. And so it was when they were around, they turned about 1 and I went back to work. The thing for me about that parenting journey was that I had wanted it to happen earlier than it did. But unfortunately, in the 4 years preceding that, I had been in an environment where I had experienced bullying and humiliation, and the toll that had taken on me was probably not fully understood by me until much later. And that experience is probably what we would now consider to be a psychosocial hazard. And despite the fact that I raised that bullying and humiliation with HR and with other senior people, nothing changed. And I guess in that time and in my own naivety at that time, I just sat in it and stewed in it and stressed in it. It isn't really until much later now that I sort of step back onto the balcony and look back on those times that I do understand that that was a psychosocial hazard. And that I fully understand the impact that that had on my life, because it wasn't until leaving that environment that I was able to fulfill my dream of becoming a parent. So there was really strong both psychosocial things that were then affecting my physiology as well. So as we begin to think about the concept of psychosocial hazards, I think that there is a temptation for us to think a lot and not always to feel the feelings of what this actually means. So for me, as I began to think about the talk today and the work that we're doing in this space, I think it's really important that in the fear of responding to risks of psychosocial hazards, that we don't forget to alternate between what I might call the balcony and the basement. And so the story that I started with today was me getting back into that basement of saying, what have been the experiences that I have had that have been both good and not so good, that have, I guess, reinforced what are the things that we need to be thinking about in workplaces, and then how we combine that with what the research is showing. So I guess for me, in parallel to my sort of parenting journey, where I then, when my babies were one, I returned to work, and unlike the previous workplace that I had experienced, fortunately, this work environment was one that felt very safe and warm and nurturing. And that was a lucky thing for me, because I'd only been back at work for about 2 months when I discovered that I was having another baby, which was quite awkward and quite unexpected. And so in that workplace, I then had the experience of being pregnant and having 2 little babies at home, and then taking a year off and coming back and having 3 babies. So it was a really tricky time. And for me then, experiencing that environment during a very chaotic time for me at home, and the safety of coming there, and the ways in which that workplace navigated that with me and enabled me to perform my best. And so I guess that's a little sort of personal experience that leads me to think about the parallels for us as a parent, where I was learning at home that I could not protect my children from the hazards that there are in the world, that they were beginning increasingly to go out into environments where they may experience bullying, they may experience loss, they may experience stress, they may experience environments where they don't know what's expected of them, they may experience change and transition. And so rather than me just being able to control their environment and to be able to recognize risks, I also needed to raise their resilience and build their capability to deal with the circumstances that they would find themselves in. And so I think that, I'm not suggesting that in workplaces that we become locus parentis, but I think as leaders in workplaces, we can learn a little bit from the way that we think about raising resilient children. And so I'm going to suggest that we take lessons from the warm and nurturing workplace that I had, and we think about the ways that we might respond to psychosocial hazards through the combination of both protection and promotion. So I think for me, we do obviously need to take those steps to understand what risks there are in our workplaces. And we've been very good at doing that over a long period of time in terms of physical risks. And making sure that there is occupational safety and health, from, you know, the kinds of desks that people have being ergonomic, to hard hats, to, you know, all sorts of things that keep people's physical bodies safe. And we are now, because of new legislation and because it's the right thing to do, needing to think about recognising and responding to risks to people's mental health. And that's what we mean when we talk about psychosocial hazards, because again, I think we can get into a bit of a spin, and it's important to just say, well, what is a psychosocial hazard? And really what that is anything that can cause harm to individuals' mental and psychological well-being. And there are many things that can happen in that space. And interestingly, the research is showing that one of the largest hazards that's coming through is when people feel unclear in terms of the expectations on them. So I think for me, what I want to focus on today is not in the space of the responding to risks. I think that we're already very good at that, and I think we can apply what we've been learning in the physical safety aspect around that. But what I really want us to think about today is the way that we can raise resources, resilience, and leverage relationships in the workplace. And so the word resilience, like well-being, I guess, can be very overused. So I am using the definition today that comes from Aaron Jardine, Andrea Downey and others, that resilience is what emerges when people have access to resources necessary to effectively adapt to environmental adversity. So I think what we are wanting to do is to equip our people with those resources so that they can adapt to any environmental adversity that might occur. So in the same way for my children going out into the world, or for us, perhaps going into a workplace, how are we psychologically equipped with the resources and resilience to better adapt and navigate to the struggle that will inevitably occur? And I think for too long, what we've been doing is that we have been thinking that struggle, or hazards in this case, are the issue, and trying to really white knuckle it to deal with all of those hazards and issues. My suggestion is that it's an and, it's not an either or, but that where we have traditionally spent our time in that space, we now need to add to this around how are we better equipping our people to better navigate the adversities that they will inevitably experience. And so what I'm suggesting is that this is about guiding growth. And so we might see ourselves in this context a bit like a gardener. Any good gardener will know that it is a combination between the seed and the soil that is needed to grow healthy, flourishing, thriving plants, or in this case, maybe people. And so when we think about that, we need to think about the fact that we have seeds, and those seeds can be doing all the things in the world that they can to thrive and flourish, but they also need to be sitting in a context of soil that is nurturing them and helping them and cultivating the context for them to thrive and grow. So I don't know why that is making all that noise. So what I want to share with you today is an approach that I have developed, which is called sow seeds. And within this, there are a number of little factors or conditions that I consider to be part of the success as we better navigate psychosocial hazards in a more strengths-based way. And I'm going to walk through these with you in the next little while. I'm going to allow some time for questions, and I would really love for you to begin interacting with us as we go through. Andy is monitoring the chat, so feel free to put any comments in there as I go. I just also want to acknowledge at this point that I do not consider myself to be an expert in the navigation of psychosocial hazards. I think this is something that we are all learning and growing with together. Certainly, it's something that I have done a lot of work in and have expertise, but we're all learning and growing. And I also welcome your input in terms of what you are discovering works well in your place. So the first seed, I guess, we might think about is taking a more of a strengths-based approach. So the work that I do, and some of you may have seen the How to Thrive film, my work and the work in How to Thrive is informed by positive psychology. And that is when we are really focusing on the research and the science about what it takes for people to thrive. It also means pivoting our focus from what is wrong to what is strong. And I think it's very easy, as I've been saying, for us when we begin to consider the need to be responsible and responsive to psychosocial hazards, to focus in on the issues, the risks and problems, and to take that deficit-based approach. So what I'm encouraging here is that we are also opening ourselves up to say, what is working well? And how can we grow more of what's working well? And so that is taking what we call an appreciative inquiry approach, where we understand that what we focus on grows. And when we spend our time researching and responding to risks, we get more of them. When we move towards the light and we talk about and we generate around the things that are working, we get more of that. And that is the work of David Copperwriter in appreciative inquiry. So we want to help people rediscover their strengths and what's working well at an individual level, but right through to a systems level, we also want to be moving towards that perspective. And one of the other reasons that's important is because the neuroscience shows us that when we think about the things that are working well, when we experience positive emotions, like joy, awe, hope, pride, serenity, gratitude, inspiration, when we are enabling ourselves to be hopeful, we actually open up. Our peripheral vision expands. We see 75% in that opened up state versus 15% in a negative or neutral state. We're more able to solve problems. We're more able to connect closely with others. We're more resilient and better able to navigate difficulty. So we do want to be, for ourselves and for our people, more often having that experience of thinking about things that are going well rather than just focusing on the issues, risks and problems. And so, as I said, this is grounded in the science of positive psychology, whereas we may have traditionally been thinking about that space in the pink there, the surviving and solving, that there is a newer science now and research about what it takes for people to grow. And that's what I'm suggesting that we embrace. One of the other things that I think is important here is that we open up. And this is very important for leaders, right? And those people who are in influence, because we look to them as our guides and our role models. And I know many of you are in those kind of positions. So how can we think about modeling that it's okay to not be okay? How can we think about communicating that it's okay to falter, to fall down, to fail, and to model a growth mindset that says that with effort, I will grow and change and get better. So I also think that this is where we can consider the importance of being able to be vulnerable. And we had the wonderful Louise Meadows on our interview with us a couple of weeks ago. Louise is the Chief People Officer for Greater Western Water, and she talked about as a leader how she has leveraged vulnerability. And how we can see that as a shortcut to psychological safety. And really, psychological safety is so critical. You know, that is the soil that we want to see happening when we are looking at better navigating psychosocial hazards. And so we do notice from the research that workers reported fewer experiences of psychosocial hazards when they had higher levels of psychological safety. And that included the belief that talking openly and honestly was valued. And so the cultivation of a culture where we can speak our truth. And so if you imagine me back in that workplace when I had 3 babies at home and I was coming to work, and I could say, it's actually really tough. I haven't slept very much. And I would be listened to and responded to with compassion. And as soon as I felt that, I could move on and be productive and do my work. And so some of you would have seen the How to Thrive film that features my work. And many of you may not be aware that we were filming How to Thrive in 2020, which was in the middle of Melbourne's longest lockdown. So what that meant was that we took our people who were strangers to each other, and the only thing that they had in common was struggle. And we took them on a wilderness retreat. And basically what that meant was taking them on a school camp and into a really kind of quite rugged environment with no internet for a couple of days. Now, after that retreat, we never got to see those people again face to face for many months. It turns out that what happened on that weekend and the investments that we made in cultivating psychological safety held us for the months that followed in a way that we had enough, particularly I had enough safety with those people to still support them and go on a really transformational process with them, because we had invested so much in creating that psychological safety on that weekend. And so for me, rightly or wrongly, we might want to use different words, but one of the things that I think that we should be doing is leading with love or with care, because in my mind, everything else will follow. And following along from that, we want to think about having a whole human approach. And the wonderful Jane Dutton talks about the fact that, you know, we spend, most of us on average, 100,000 hours of our lives at work. And because we are human and not robots, our struggle from home will seep into work and vice versa. And so we need to begin to see people as more than just heads. We need to begin to see and know and respond to the whole human. So again, you know, thinking about me, I am at work, but I'm also a parent to 3 babies at home, and there is lots of things going on. And if a workplace doesn't know what else you have going on and show compassion to that, then that contributes to people's experience of hazards. So we need to respond with compassion. We need to get to know our people and the various hats that they wear in their communities and families outside of work. We need to know what motivates them, what they care about, and who they wish to become. Because that is the secret for us finding as well about accountability. This is not just about the responsibility of the workplace, it's about us also holding shared accountability. So we do want to cultivate a culture of compassion. We see again that the research is showing that workers who reported that their organisation was caring and safe reported levels of performance, wellbeing and psychological safety, and that was lower experience of hazards. So we know also that thriving and that the responsibilities around this, they're a dance between the me and the we, right? So we do need to think about this idea that it's not just the responsibility of leaders in workplaces, that this is a shared responsibility. So we need to send the message that our workplace will do our bit, but that we are all accountable for cultivating thriving and safety. It is a collaborative effort, and as I like to say, thriving is not a spectator sport. It's something that we need to get involved in and be part of fully. We can't just do from the sidelines. And so that leads me to talking about then, how do we do that? Like if we're talking about the responsibility of individuals, what is that? So you remember in the beginning, I suggested that we needed to equip our people. And we need to do that by providing education, not just therapy. Now, like it or not, because we might argue that it ought not be our responsibility in workplaces to educate people around thriving. We might think it's not even our responsibility to provide therapy, but we've moved past that now. And not only is it legislated, but we know that our employees are looking to that. They are looking to their workplaces oftentimes as their primary source of mental health support. And so we need to listen and respond in a context where we know that people are quite quitting, and we need to also attract our best talent by providing these environments. So we want to, and I think, you know, most workplaces now are pretty good at the therapy side. There is EAP, there is mental health first aid, and there is a response to people once they start to fall and falter and experience mental ill health. What we have not been so good at, however, is the way that we are building things upstream so that we are equipping people and resourcing them better to navigate struggle when it occurs. So what we have found from the research is that many workers are saying that they don't really know how to confidently care for their well-being. So in the same way for their physical health, when we ask people, they say they know how to look after their physical health. They know they need to eat well, sleep well, move well, but they don't seem to know the mental health equivalent of eating their broccoli and going to the gym. But research is showing us that we can all learn how to thrive, regardless of where we are at a mental health, on the mental health continuum. And so really what we want to think about is that sustaining our wellbeing at work is less dependent on the situations that we find ourselves in and more dependent on having the ability to navigate those situations. So what role can we play in building that ability? Because 34.1% of employees reported only that number, 34% were saying that they were confidently able to care for their well-being. So what we notice there is that there is a knowledge gap. There is a gap there between what people know about caring for themselves physically and how they know to care for themselves in terms of their mental health and well-being and being resilient. So that provides an opportunity for us and for us with How to Thrive. That brings us to thinking about having a framework for thriving that we can use as both a measure and a tool for teaching people how to thrive. And so the framework that I developed and had been using before I was approached by the filmmakers is called Beacon. And Beacon is a framework that is grounded in the science of positive psychology, neuroscience, wellbeing science. And it has a metaphor of thinking about shining our brightest for ourselves and for others. And it can be used at the individual level right up to the systems level. Beacon is made up of 6 beams of thriving, and each of those have evidence-based strategies underneath them. So the first of that is belonging. And we need to think about both individuals' environments that prioritise a sense of close connection, knowing that being closely connected to others is one of the most important and well-resourced foundations for thriving. We've also seen that it is a protective factor in terms of navigating hazards. We want our people to feel fully engaged and alive. We want them to feel like they can get a sense of flow and that they can have the opportunity to use their strengths. We want to have, both for individuals and the organisation, that concept of accountability. So people need to have goals for themselves. They need to know where they're going. They need to have the opportunity to pursue those goals with a combination of grit and grace. And really in this space, we want to be thinking about how we are in a firm but fair way, saying we are showing and sharing tools for thriving with you, but we are also holding you accountable for doing the things that help you to be at your best. And then we bring in compassion, which is a combination of the opportunities to have kindness in our cultures and have a compassion for ourselves and others that responds to people by saying, I see your suffering, I see your pain. I don't have to be it to see it, but I can respond in a way that says that I will lean in with an intent to soothe that for you. And then we have optimism. We have the opportunity to think about dialing up the experience of positive emotion and supporting people to be able to navigate difficult emotions. And using hope as well. And then finally, nurture is about the physical health response and the way that works in with our mental health. So making sure that we are eating, moving and resting well, and that we have opportunities to be mindful. So what we want to think about with this framework is that we can use it both as a measure. So for individuals, and some of you might have seen this little card that we sometimes use, and we also have an app that we created with the University of Melbourne. When we work with workplaces, we use our measure, our beacon measure that Aaron Jardine from the University of Melbourne helped us to create, to measure where people are on this beacon framework. And the reason that we do that is that oftentimes people or organisations know that they don't feel quite right, but they don't know why, and they don't know where to start. So this provides us with a baseline measure, and it also allows us to say, where am I already shining brightly and where might I need some work? And so that is really important for us right through the approach. So it's been really important and encouraging for us to look at how this works. So those of you who saw the How to Thrive film would have seen that we, in that instance, applied this with people who were in deep struggle. Those people, most of them had diagnosed mental health issues. And we did that because we wanted to prove that this could work at that very extreme end of the mental health continuum. But what we have been doing since then is also using this preventatively and proactively, and in fact, spanning the mental health continuum. The data that you see in front of you is from a large cohort of employees in a Victorian government department that we worked with recently. Those people were not struggling, or they were not coming to this program because they were struggling. They were seeing this more as part of professional development and resourcing their people so that they could navigate things as well as they could. So it's been important for us to see that despite people coming into this being fine, that post-program they are learning, and not only learning tools for thriving and resilience, but they are also coming out of it with increased levels of belonging, engagement, accountability, compassion, optimism, and nurture. And so we are building their capability, we're building their knowledge. It's also important that, as well as Beacon, that we're able to see increases in all of the areas that were to do with literacy and more broadly across a spectrum of indicators that are to do with thriving. Importantly, we see reductions where you see that dip there. Those reductions were around reducing anxiety and life stress. So that's exactly what we want to see happening. And overall, we see that there is a big difference in the degree of thriving pre and post program. So just to give you some idea, this was a program that occurred with a blended approach of e-learning and live sessions that went for 1 hour once a week for 6 weeks. And so when we think about the impact of thriving at work and its relationship to dealing with psychosocial hazards, it's important for us to understand the broader picture here is that when people feel like they are thriving and that their employer cares about their well-being, that compared to other employees, that they're 69% less likely to actively search for a new job, that they're 71% less likely to experience burnout, that they're 3 times more likely to be engaged, 36% more likely to be thriving, 5 times more likely to advocate for their company as a place to work, and 5 times more likely to strongly agree that they trust their leadership. So we do see that an experience of thriving is very important when it comes to these factors that make a difference. And so we go back to our seeds now, and we need to realise, as I did after I saw those results, because that is very pleasing for me, I want to see that we can increase thriving for people across the mental health continuum, but also that we can sustain that. So one of the things that's important for me and also for you in this process is that we do evaluate. We pause, we get up onto the balcony, we have a look, where are we, what's working well, and we combine that with basement time, because I could look at that data and I could say that looks amazing, but what was people's experience of that? So I am suggesting as well that we do co-design. We take a process to reflect, refine, and review with the people who are part of our journeys. But we also keep in mind the importance of celebrating the successes along the way. Because when it comes to thriving, when it comes to responding to psychosocial hazards, we might say that we'll never actually be there. I don't know that we'll ever get to a point where we say, that's it, we're one and done. It just doesn't really work like that. So what that means is that we do need to keep asking, what's working, and finding and seeking the stories of success, and celebrating those things. The other really important part of this approach when we're taking a strengths-based approach is that we are using hope theory. And when I talk about hope here, I'm not talking about a fluffy kind of concept. What I'm talking about is that we need to encourage individuals and systems to think forward to the future and to dream and imagine about what that best possible future looks like in a context where our people feel seen and safe, and that they will be soothed without judgment if they suffer. And so we want to be dreaming and designing together and harnessing that future hope. And one of the reasons that's important is that the most effective way to change is not so much to focus on what you want to achieve, but on who you wish to become, or who we wish to become. And so, utilising that opportunity for forward thinking and dreaming. And then finally, we want to think about doing this at a systems level. What we know is that the response to hazards or the implementation of strategies around thriving require us to be thinking through the levels of me, we, and us. And so some of you might remember if you've watched the How to Thrive film, you may have seen Jason, who was a junior doctor. And in that story, you may have observed Jason's struggle to deal with his own well-being when he was in a system that he had little control over, and that was dictating his shift work. And what occurred really was a degree of kind of, blame from him about the system, and not really wanting to take responsibility for his own thriving. So for me, this concept, and this comes from Warren and Kern, says the cultivating wellbeing or thriving, it's a shared responsibility, and it's a process that is is interactive between the person level and the group level again. So for us with How to Thrive, we have designed our programs with this in mind, and thinking about starting out with individuals who need to learn and equip themselves and become better resourced. So we might refer to this as having thrivability, having the wellbeing literacy, having the evidence-based tools at their fingertips so that they can be held accountable and hold themselves accountable for doing the things that help them to feel and function as well as they can. Our expectation is that when people have learned that they're living it, and that in workplaces where we are doing this, we're encouraging leaders in their teams and with their staff to have a thrivability plan, and they will use the lens of Beacon, and people will nominate the things that they want to work on, and then that's where the shared accountability comes in, and the alliance between that leader and their staff member around an agreement and a commitment to accountability for thriving. And then the next level for us, where we begin to think about the we, the relational group or team aspect, is where we have the leading or the teaching of this. And so we are training, leaders and peers as Thrive guides. And so in the past, we might have thought about mental health first aiders and these kind of roles, but really they are at that recognizing and responding to risk end. So how can we also have leaders and peers and champions in workplaces who are equipped to support people using the strengths-based approach? And then finally, at the stage of thinking about a whole of system, then what we want to do for us, what that looks like, is using the Beacon framework at that level and doing an audit and a measure to say, to what extent is this organisation cultivating for its people an environment of belonging, engagement, accountability, compassion, optimism and nurture, and that we use existing data to do that audit. And we also ask ourselves, what's working well? What are the other programs that we've got, and how can we not start from a blank slate, but understand there are other things happening? And then we work through to an appreciative inquiry approach that involves representatives from that whole system and coming out with an action plan at the end that is activated by our Thrive guides. So that's just a little bit about the approach that we've been working on in this space with some of the clients that we have. And so just going back to where we started here and thinking about what might work in this space, and again, recognizing that, everyone has different workplaces, and you might have some ideas and intelligence that I don't have. But for me, what I'm suggesting is that we are thinking about raising resources and resilience and leveraging relationships. So resilience is the positive psychological capacity for people to rebound and to bounce back from adversity, uncertainty, conflict, failure, or even positive change. And that we want to think about this carefully, because when we think about risks and we think about struggle, we think that they're bad things. But we want people to have enough resilience that they can grow from those things and they can see them as a benefit. And so we begin to embrace stress and struggle when we're well equipped, and think about growing and becoming stronger on the other side. And so, of course, as we go through this process, and those of you who are with us today are probably here because you have a role and influence in this space. It's really important that we nurture ourselves as well as each other, just like a gardener, to enable ourselves to grow and thrive through the process. So that brings me to the point now of asking whether you have any questions. So I might just share this with you in case we go off the slides. I don't know what the plan is, but just before we do that, I just wanted to share with you that clearly this is something I'm very passionate about. And so if anyone would be open to talking more about this, to share their own ideas of what they're doing in their workplace, or to hear what we're doing, then please feel free to reach out to me. There is my email address and a QR code to a 30-minute chat with me. So please feel free to do that. But I am very excited to hear any questions that people have, or comments or challenges as well.
Thanks, Marie. That was a really great talk. As always, I always love what you got to say about inner space. I've got a few comments here, and if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to add them into the chat box in LinkedIn or wherever you're viewing this from. So we had a comment from Natalie asking if this is being recorded, and yes, it will. We'll download this after the session and upload it back onto the socials, so you can view it again, or feel free to share it with your colleagues or anyone else who might be interested in this talk. Heidi Denning says Beacon is such a great framework, Marie. And another comment from Larice, celebrating is such an important part of the journey. And another comment from Wade, thank you, Marie, love it.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Those are all very beautiful comments. I appreciate that very much.
Lovely. Well, there's no further comments. We might wrap this up. But yeah, as we said, we're here. Check us out on all the on the socials, and link in with us. Reach out to us if you want to talk more. Yeah, we've got some workshops as well based around psychosocial hazards, as well as other topics to do with thriving and in the workplace, as well as individuals. There's we've also got e-learning for individuals. For guides, corporate training programs. So I've got tons of stuff in the background. A couple more comments coming through. So Tony McManus, great presentation, Marie. Have you interacted with WorkSafe regarding this stuff?
No.
No.
I don't think so. I think we're having a conversation in New South Wales with, and I'm not sure if it's actually WorkSafe or if it's related to that. So please feel free, if you have any connections in there. We would always be very happy to have a conversation with WorkSafe. That is very aligned. We're definitely talking to a number of parties around return to work in South Australia, New South Wales. So yeah, definitely a space that we're thinking about.
Yep. Got another question from Helen. So trauma is a psychosocial hazard. How do you see a positive psychology approach supporting the reduction of vicarious trauma in the workplace?
What an amazing question. Thank you. I think, I think trauma is one of those tricky things where oftentimes people bring trauma with them. And I think that when people are bringing trauma with them, it is really important for me to say that a positive psychology approach is not, I'm not suggesting that it replace traditional psychology and therapy. And I think that working through past trauma, absolutely that has a place to be done, with traditional therapeutic approaches. In terms of how we reduce the vicarious trauma in workplaces, that's something that's very dear to my heart. I'm working a lot at the moment with child protection, housing, foster carers and people like that. And I think that, when we are well within ourselves and when we are taking practices to support our own thriving, those things don't have as much of a hold over us. And I don't want to say that lightly. It is something that we should be very cautious about. But I think that when we feel that we're in an environment where we can debrief, where we are able to be surrounded with care and compassion, where we have a balance and where we have boundaries, where we have the opportunity for doing things that lift us and lighten the load, my hope would be that the capacity for that trauma to really sort of negatively impact over time is reduced. Now, that is just my opinion, but that would be what I would be recommending, that alongside all of the other things we should be doing and the debriefing, that we use those other approaches to hopefully protect us.
Fantastic. Eric's got a comment here. Thanks for today's chat, Marie and Andrew. I'll reach out to you next week. And
Beautiful.
another comment from Larice that she's doing an all-day session on this tomorrow. So thanks for the session as good preparation for it. So that's good.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Always happy to help.
Absolutely. Okay, that seems to be it. So yeah, we'll wrap up the session now. But yeah, as I said, feel free to reach out to us, and hope you have a great day. Thanks, Marie.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. It's I know how busy you are, so thank you for coming. And the session is recorded, so you'll find that, and feel free to ping that to other people or to reach out to us for anything that you might need. At the end of the day, this is something that we care very much about supporting and impacting into the world. So always happy to have a conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Bye for now.